Case 623 by Danny Yu, Chapter 59.
I still don't need saving.
He lets out a breath, suddenly so tired of it all. And his back hurt. He thought the serum would have stopped that kind of thing from happening, but no.
Not for my family, not by you.
He reaches up, pushes the hair out of his face.
And your little errand girl, now she's stuck here too. How could you do something so stupid?
Look, no! The other man rears out of his prone position on the floor. She doesn't deserve that. She was only trying to help. She's my friend.
Maximov is in the clear, Madame Rue said, glancing at Tony through the projected video call. We've been investigating the case ever since Lagos happened. It's become quite clear that while her training and control is apparently insufficient when it comes to the physical applications of her powers, she cannot be held responsible. Her commanding officer was the one who put her in the situation to do that kind of damage. Add it to Roger's list of mistakes we intend to.
She paused for a moment, gave a brief smile.
Maximov will be tasked with nothing, and now that she has signed the accords, she will be accepted as an official member of the Avengers. However, we cannot clear her for duty until her control has become better. We would like a documented training regimen for her, and for her to see a therapist. Once that is in place, we will reinstate her upon a positive psychological evaluation and evidence that her control has become sufficient.
She's not going to like that, Tony muttered. He hadn't planned on speaking loudly enough for Madame Rue to hear him, but apparently her ears were sharper than he'd realized.
She doesn't have to like it, she said. She simply has to do it, or she will have to retire and figure out how well she likes civilian life. The Nigerians are unhappy about this as it is. We need to give them some reassurances. And while psychological evaluations can be a tiresome chore, it is normal procedure in many service branches to undergo them after traumatic experiences on the job. You know we put that in the accords.
Tony nodded. He hadn't realized that would be in effect for a pre-accords mission, but it made sense. And it would probably do Maximov some good to get a bit of therapy.
Thank you for clearing all this up,
he said. I'll make sure to let Rhodey know. And her.
And yeah, nothing was entirely official yet, but it was obvious to Tony that Rhodes would be the next team leader.
No one else already affiliated with the Avengers could compete with his credentials or suitability for the job. No one else was as widely trusted, and in the end, it really was that simple. Besides, there was no one Tony would rather have as team leader, and he'd fight anyone who objected. Madame Rue flashed him a small smile and took a few more moments to exchange courtesies before they ended the call. Letting out a breath, Tony picked his abandoned sandwich back up, grabbed his pot of coffee, and made it a shot. He had a few projects he needed to work on, and with the kids at school and Bruce working on a project of his own, now was the best time. He got into the elevator and waited for it to move down. It didn't. Tony frowned, a few dozen different scenarios already running through his head. Joe, take me down to the shop, he said. No answer. Joe, he asked. Fry. He took a breath and reached out to manually press the button. The elevator began to descend. Nerves thrummed right beneath his skin. He moved his right hand towards the trigger on the watch on his left wrist, ready to deploy the gauntlet. Slowly, strangely, forebodingly, the elevator came to a stop. The doors opened. Tony stepped out, still with the watch at the ready. Nothing happened. He sped his steps, doing what he could to seem as normal and nonchalant as usual. As he walked up, typed his passcode on the holographic keyboard, he stepped through the doors and made for the nearest workbench. Friday, he said again, keeping his voice steady and even with some effort. Someone stepped out in front of him. Tony triggered the gauntlet and released a sonic blast, heart pounding just a bit too hard in his chest. The intruder fell on their back before getting their feet under them and jumping back up. Gritting his teeth, Tony powered up the repulsor. The telltale whine should be warning enough. The intruder raised their hands, slowly coming to a standstill, and finally they caught the light enough that Tony could tell who it was. Natasha, he asked, what are you doing? What did you do to Fry and Joe? She tossed him some kind of small mechanical device and gave a smile that might have been classified as cheeky on anyone else.
I'm testing your security for you, she said. Turns out if you know enough about their code, they aren't so hard to dismantle. Because they were new and young and hadn't yet built the kinds of firewalls Jarvis had shrouded himself in throughout his last years. Something inside Tony clenched even as he held on tight to the device. He was going to have to run a thorough checkup later and build a proper damn defense against whatever this was. What the hell is up with you shield types and this fucked up habit you have of attacking my AI? Don't you get that they're people too? Right now they're stuck in their servers, blinded, deaf, and mute and scared to death. I guess it's a good thing it was done by a friend then, Natasha said with a shrug, flinging herself into the nearest chair. They'll be back online in 8 minutes. And why did you do it? Tony asked. If you wanted to talk, you could have just asked. What the hell is up with this whole setup? Are you trying to threaten me? She gave another shrug, and it had been years since Tony had last seen her act like this, since he had felt truly threatened by her. If it was a threat, you'd know. Just a reminder. You need the Avengers as much as we need you. Debatable, Tony thought but did not say. Instead, he simply cocked an eyebrow. She seemed to shift before his eyes, shedding the careless, cool demeanor of before, growing warmer, softer, more imploring. It was creepy, was what it was, and seeing her shift like that when she was usually much subtler. It was strangely like watching a robot malfunction. I want to see Steve, she told him at last. It isn't right him locked up like that. Tony said, I think if you went and did a survey in Germany and Romania, you'd find quite a few people who'd disagree with you. She cocked an eyebrow. And when have you ever cared about that when it was your friends on the line? I think you're mistaking me for Rogers, Tony said, finally sitting down in a chair of his own. He considered letting the gauntlet retract. When he did, he couldn't even say why. Those people matter. They have always mattered. I've always tried to do my best for the civilians. Ever since Afghanistan, I've tried to do my best to stand for accountability. After the Battle of New York, I footed as much of the bill as I could justify to the shareholders. After you and Rogers burnt S.H.I.E.L.D., I saved everyone I could. After every damn Avengers mission, I've been cleaning up. This is too much for me, in good conscience, to sweep under the rug. She snorted, uncharacteristically inelegant. And what about the fact that this is all your fault? She asked. If you had only shared your knowledge of Bonds' whereabouts, The immediate flash of anger rushing through Tony's body was more than enough to suppress the sting of instinctive guilt. Don't you dare speak to me about sharing information. Isbeth, how long did you and Rogers know what happened to my parents without caring to tell me? Natasha's eyes flickered away for a moment before meeting his again. Come on, Tony, you're letting your ego get in the way. This isn't about you. This is about the fact that you are throwing Steve under the bus while doing your damnedest to save everyone else who's been caught up in this mess. Her voice had sharpened now, and her eyes with it, and Tony was momentarily grateful the repulsor was still humming with power in the palm of his hand. Wanda gets a slap on the wrist for Lagos. Her commanding officer should have known better than to bring her to a fight she wasn't ready for. Tony said, keeping his voice even with some effort. Hell, he should have known better than to go in while leaving 2 of his strongest team members at home, let alone without alerting and cooperating with the proper authorities. But then that's how Rogers always operates when it's Barnes on the line. Well, maybe if you hadn't retired, hadn't dropped all of that in our laps, Natasha said, maybe it would have gone better then. Steve doesn't know this world the way you and I do, and yeah, I noticed you were there. Tony said. And like you just said, you know how the world operates. So why is it my fault for wanting to dedicate time to my traumatized daughter when you were second in command and didn't do a thing to mitigate his ignorance? Her fists clenched, and there was a flash at her wrists as her widow's bites began to charge. Tony raised the gauntlet again, aiming straight at her until the flashing light from the bites receded. I don't have the president of every known country on speed dial, she said at last. It would have taken me too long, and Rumlow would have vanished again. Vision does, Tony said. He has access to my whole database. Come on, let's be honest. Even if I had still been a full-time Avenger, and trust me, I wouldn't be even now if it weren't necessary, would Steve have actually asked for help? For a moment, she looked helpless, almost childlike, and despite himself, Tony didn't think it was fully an act. You always fix everything, she said. Tony shook his head. I'm not going to be the guy you call when you need to bury the bodies, he said. That's not what I signed up for. She was silent for long moments, seeming to compose herself. T'Challa is walking away, no punishment, she said. He was part of that shit show in Romania, too.
I have nothing to do with King T'Challa, Tony said. I'm pretty sure you've had more conversations with him than I have. My best guess is that Wakanda will help cover the damages, and he'll give a very heartfelt apology. No one can force more than that out of him, regardless of what he's done. He has diplomatic immunity.
She stared at him, eyes narrowed. And Bonds? She asked at last. The man who killed your parents? Who caused at least as many deaths as Steve these past few days, and many more if we count the past? Why does he get your lawyer sweeping everything under the rug, while Steve gets thrown under the bus?
Steve threw himself under the bus! God damn it! Tony shouted. He sucked in a breath to calm himself down, ran a hand over his face. Barnes' mental state means he can't legally be held accountable for anything, and he's less of a danger on his own cognizance than in jail under Ross's control.
With your lawyers, Steve...
No, Tony said. None of you ever seem to get this, but political capital is not some constant thing you can spend and spend endlessly. It's like any other currency. You earn some, you spend some. If you're not careful, it runs out. By keeping mine high, I keep the Avengers Initiative on solid ground. I keep Bruce safe. I keep my company and all my hundreds of thousands of employees secure. If I were to go to ball for Rogers, I'd be spending all my favors, all my weight, all my lean, and I'd have nothing left to do for anything else, including keeping up the work on the Accords until they work properly. He took a deep breath. Did you ever stop to wonder if maybe, just maybe, Steve put himself where he is and needs to lie in the bed he made? Her jaw clenched for a moment, and Tony got it. He wished he didn't, but he did. Natasha was in many ways a rational being, more pragmatic than anyone else he knew, but she was still human. She craved friendship. She craved trust. Rogers had given her that, and although she might agree with Tony out of sheer logic, Tony could never give her what she needed on a human level. Even if he'd wanted to, it just wasn't possible. He'd never trusted her fully, and he'd never be able to.
Captain America in jail, she said. What a fucking joke.
If you think so, go get him a better lawyer, Tony said with a shrug. I'm sure you've got a few paychecks stashed away. I can't help you. Now, please, I've got a lot of work I need to do, and when the girls come back online, they're going to be less than pleased with you. Natasha rolled her eyes, but she did leave. Just moments later, the voices of both his AI sounded, soothing him back into something resembling calm. He pressed the button to retract the gauntlet back into the watch and reached up to rub at his temples. Letting out a long sigh, he threw Natasha's device on a work table. Scan that, he told Friday. And Joe, please make a note to Rhodey that Natasha needs a psyche eval as well. With someone good. Real good, or she'll bullshit her way out of it.
Yes, boss, Friday said, even as Jocasta timed him with a, of course, Anthony.
And fuck, but the sound of their voices was the best sound he'd heard in a good long while.